This is Louise from Butterfly Dolphin Crochet. So today is episode 2 of the beginner series that I'm doing. We're actually going to be talking about how to hold your yarn and how to hold your hook. There's so different many ways of doing it. The basic is the pencil grip, which is what I tend to use, or the knife grip. Some people do tend to hold their hooks like that as well and work that way. So we'll talk about that as well. And we're also going to learn how to chain and do what's called a double crochet in UK terms. If you're following from the US, this stitch will be classed as a single crochet. Now, it's one of the smallest stitches that we use, besides a stitch called a slip stitch. Now, a slip stitch we'll be using later on in the series, mainly because at the moment I'm just doing basic little squares patchwork, so your patchwork will look like that. So it's about 3 inches by 3 inches, well 3.5 by 3 I think. So they're not going to be very big squares. Yeah, 3 inches, but 3 by 3. So it's up to you if you end up making a blanket at the end of it or making a scarf. But the ways in joining them are similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little blanket. I'm not doing a big one. I'm just going to do a toddler size blanket. So I'm thinking, if you're following along with me, which will give you a few goes at trying to learn how to do the double crochet / single crochet if you're from the US, at doing it. So depending on how big you want your scarf / blanket or whatever you end up turning it into, will depend on how many of these squares you will need. There'll be a few different squares. We're not just doing this square. You'll get a few different squares throughout each week, because I'll be going through each stitch. So every stitch, so you, in theory, learning every stitch for this blanket. And then I might throw in a few different squares that will help you learn how to do V-stitches, bubbles and granny squares, and working in and around and stuff like that. So they're not just doing back and forth. So you kind of will learn some of the basic things. So for this episode, we will be making one of these. So I would suggest, if you're making a toddler size blanket, you'll need at least 10 to 15, depending on how big of a toddler size blanket you would like to make. I'm going to aim for 10, and then I'll see where I'm at this week. So I might tell you in the next episode specifically how many in total I actually made. Bearing in mind, most of the squares that I'm making at the moment will be 3 by 3. 3 inches, and that's in inches, by the way. 1 second. So there will be 3 inches. So I reckon if you have 10, that's 30 inches just by 10. Having 10 of these. Well, that'll be 15 inches by 15 inches. So if we have the treble crochet, the half treble crochet, the double treble crochet on top of that, and 10 of them. So yeah, it'll be quite a decent sized toddler blanket in the end. And that's just before we add the granny squares and working in the squares in and round kind of thing. So I'll get on with the actual start of the tutorial. So as you can see, at the moment I have my hook, a tape measure, a pair of scissors, and a yarn needle, a dada needle, or something just with a hole so you can thread your wool in at the end, which I haven't actually done on my square yet, as you've already noticed. So I want to go through how to hold your there's a few different ways of doing it. Well, hold your yarn, so that's where to put it. Now I do have one of these. I'm going to take that bit out. One of these, which is where you put the yarn inside and then feed the yarn itself through this bit here, and it will come out through here, and you can pull this strand from that, and it will just bounce around in here. Now the problem I have with that is that most of the balls that I tend to use don't fit very well, as you can probably see from that. So I tend to use this to hold my little wonder ball, as I call it. This will have quite a few things in it that I tend to need, and this will follow me around the house. So I'll have my stitch markers, both just a clip-on one if I'm actually wanting to count rows, for example, or if I'm in the middle of the working in the round, I'll use one of these ones. I don't know why I've got cotton wool blood in there. I must have been sorting something out. And I've got the odd little strand of yam. Usually if I'm tidying up ends and cutting off little loose bits, I put them in here, and then I end up putting that bit in the bin. I've also got a little actual needle for when I put labels and stuff on, which I will talk to you about later on in the series. And I have another one of them in there just in case I misplaced the blue one. And usually that sits inside of there, and that's where I usually end up putting my pair of scissors and other stuff on the side, so I don't actually lose it or anything. Plus I've got a dog and a cat, and the dog will try to get a mouth on anything. Little monkey. So that's how I place. Most of the time I just end up placing this on my working surface where I'm working, so it'll be on the side today. So you might see it bouncing around occasionally. So holding the crochet hook. Now, if you're using a similar crochet hook to what I've got here, I tend to slide my hand up and down depending on how many stitches and how fast I would end up working. So most of the time, if you're beginning out crocheting, you'll probably be at the working end more, because you'll be holding your hook tightly. But as you progress, you'll end up moving a little bit more freely. So as you can see, the hook on these ones is a little bit more cleaner and stuff. Now this is where your yarn will sit once it's in the hook, like so. So that's why it'll move up and down like that on the hook. So how to hold it? All you need to do is put it in your hand and see where it feels comfortable. So for me, because I watched people on YouTube on how they hold it, so I'll link a few people in the description box comment sections below for you to actually have a look at and see on how other people hold it, because they might be able to describe that slightly better than me. But I tend to hold my hook in the pencil grip, so I use my thumb to move and my fingers. So these fingers in my hand don't go really anywhere near the hook at all. It's only on this hand that I use most of my fingers. I'll explain that bit in a minute. So all this hand has to worry about is the hook. So literally once you've got a grip that you're comfortable with, bearing in mind your grips will differ depending on the size of the material that you're using and the size of the hook. Now, when I first started learning how to crochet, I started with a 4mm, which is one of the reasons why I probably deferred to that. But most of the time, at the moment, I think I said in a previous episode, I tend to range from 4 up to about 6mm. In the last couple of tutorials that I've also done, which I will link into the next episode because they'll be coming out next week, these two tutorials I'm looking at, I'm using a size 9mm hook. So it's quite a big hook. I haven't got here. So it's quite a big hook. It is 5mm bigger than this one. So it's got a bigger gauge, which also has a bigger metal base around it. So it's a lot bigger. Mainly because the yarn I'm using is twice the size of this yarn, or even bigger actually, maybe even 3-4 times the size of that. So that's how I hold my hook. Now this is also another way of, this is another thing that's slightly different depending on who you watch or who you've learnt from. Holding your yarn when you're actually working. Now, I know from other people that crochet around me, they hold their yarn way differently to how I do. But the easiest way, if you've never crocheted before, what I tend to do is I tend to feed the end of the beginning of the ball through my fourth, and usually hold it between my index finger and my thumb and wrap it round I usually then wrap it around like that. So, like I was saying, usually what I'll do when I'm trying to hold the yarn is to wrap it around my little finger, pull it up and feed it through my index finger, like that. And then that's how I work it. So every time you pull on this bit when you're crocheting, it then feeds through the whole entire thing. You're using your little finger as an index, and using that as your tension. So I'll show you. So I'll now show you how to actually work with the yarn using this method. We'll start off with, well, I'll show you how to do a slip knot first, and then I'll show you how to do some chains. So what I usually do with a slip knot is I get it between my index finger and my thumb, and use my middle finger to loop round, and then I'll pinch where it crosses over each other, put my index finger and my thumb back through that hole, pull on the smaller bit and pull the loop one way and then the longer yarn the other way, to tighten it up so it gets a bit of a loop. And that is how you do a slip stitch. So I'll repeat that again. So you wrap over, so you literally hold it doesn't matter how much of a tail you do end up leaving, so you can literally just pinch it there to keep it. So I'll leave a biggish tail this time. Wrap it round, try and wrap it around that finger, but you're using that finger to tension it so you can get a bigger hole. Pinch that, then two like that, and then grab the little tail and loop it in through, and then pull on the longer one so you have a bit of a loop like that. Okay, so once you've done that, to get the loop smaller, all you need to then do is get your hook, put it in through the loop, and then pull these two, mainly this one. This is the one that actually ends up making the hole smaller. Now you can go tight or loose, it doesn't matter too much, as long as you can move it along the hook. And that's how you do a slip knot. Okay, so this is where I usually then go like that, which then feeds the yarn around my little finger and uses my index finger as the tension. So usually I just pinch, to start that off, usually I pinch the yarn and go like that. And then, as you can probably already tell from how I'm holding it, I've pinched the yarn at where the knot is with the hook on my middle finger, and I'm using that as to hold. And as you can see now, I've got my yarn is tight. Now it's loose because I've got moved my finger. That's how you can work out your tension. So I'm now going to start doing some chains. So we do this by getting the hook and wrapping the yarn around it, and just literally pull through like so, and that equals one chain. Now we don't actually count the chain that's actually on a hook, mainly because that's classed as a working chain. Now, as you can see on this square, we've got a few stitches. Now this is 12 stitches, but because, as you can see, this chain has actually already been spoken for with the chain that's coming out of it. So usually when you're doing a double crochet or a single crochet in the US, there's usually in most of these cases is what's called turning chains. Now your turning chains are what help you get to the height that is required to use these stitches. So because this is a small stitch, you don't need that many turning chains. You'll only need one. So to get 12 stitches, you need to chain 13, lucky number 13, chains at the bottom. So going slowly, this is what we'll do. So we've already got one chain on the hook, this is the start. I call it the starting row. Some people call it a foundation row, or some people just call it a chain row. So the starting row, chain row, there's 1. So again, all we need to do is get a hook and wrap the yarn around it and pull it through. So that's 2. Get the hook, wrap around the yarn and pull through. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that is 13 chains. So that's how you do chaining. Now, some patterns will tell you how many chains to start off, and then tell you to start row 1. So we've got 13 chains here, and to start this square, row 1 will be the establishing row, and then row 2 will be the repeat row. I'll explain that as we get to that point. Right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13. So if you heard / saw then, I ended up double checking the amount of chains that I've got. We do that by by counting from here, this loop here, here, that counts as 1. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you just count like that until you get to the end one, and that will be your 13th. Now, like I said at the beginning, the loop that's on your hook is actually coming out of the last 13th chain. So your 13th chain is spoken for. This is why we have what's called turning chains within the, sorry about the beep, within the written patterns, because written, it kind of gives you the leeway to be able to have a bit of height to be able to start your row. So what we need to do, this is what's called a double crochet in the UK or a single crochet in the US. So to start that, all we need to do is skip the first chain, because that's already spoken for, and into the second chain. You can either do 1 loop or go through the bottom half of it to get, kind of theory, 2 loops on your hook here. So it'll look like you've got 3 loops on the hook, but you've actually only got 2. So you go through that bottom chain, and then like when you were chaining, you just yarn over or wrap the yarn around and pull it through that chain. So you've got, now in theory you actually have 2 loops on your hook. Now to finish this one, because we only really use 1 chain at any one time on your hook, especially in simple stitches like this. The more later on in this series I will show you how to do things like bobbles, which will have a few more chains on the hook to deal with, so we'll deal with them at that point. So for this bit we've got 2 loops on your hook. Now to finish it, so we get down the 1, you then, like you're in the chaining, you yarn over and pull that through the 2 loops, and that is what's called a double crochet in the UK or a single in the US. So do it, so one more time, so a few more times I'll go through this all the way to the end of the chain. So then what we need to do is go into the next one, like so, yarn over and pull back through. So you've got 2 loops in your hook. Yarn over, pull through. Yeah, so one more time, go in through the chain at the bottom, yarn over, pull back through, 2 loops in your hook, yarn over, pull through, 2 loops in your hook, one look hoop. Yarn over, going through the hole, yarn over, pull back through. Yarn over, pull through too. So we're just repeating that until you get to the end of the row, like so. So I'm coming up, I've got 2 more to do, and then we'll go back through and count. As you can see, mine's starting to curl. Don't worry too much about it, it will do when you've got this many rows on. So there you go, that's how you do your row. Now what we need to do is count through it to double check that we've still got 12 chains. So we do that by, as you can see this at the top, it looks like you've got V's. Now these V's are literally what your chains are. So this is how we count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I always end up having 11. That's why, because as you can see, I've missed a chain down here. So what you would do if you did that is just pull back through, put your loop back in, and then go through this chain here and yarn over like you've been doing. So this is why it's always a good idea to check your work as you go, because sometimes you will miss a chain. As you can see, I always, well, I don't always, I do sometimes. So then all we need to do now is recheck it. So 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12. Yeah. So now to start row 2, all we then need to do is chain 1, because as you remember, we need to do chaining chains. Now chain 1 is usually gets to the height that for this is what is required. So now you can turn your work like so. Now some people turn their work before the chain 1. If you feel that's better for you, you can do that. But most of the time I tend to chain 1 and then turn my work. Now what we need to do now is what we've been doing on the row below, but we won't have chains to go through because we've actually got stitches to go through now. So as you can see from mine, you've got like little holes here in between the stitches. Now that is where you'll be going through. So once you've got yourself, oh that's my tail, don't want that, sorted, and you've chained 1 and you've turned, you now need to go through that chain space. Now it looks like you've got, if I get my yarn out the way, 3 loops in your hook. Yeah. Now this, later on you'll hear me talk to you about your front loop and your back loop. Now this one that's closest to the actual, closest to you when you're actually crocheting like that, that's your front loop, and the one farthest back to you is back loop. Now some patterns will require you to go through one of them, but we'll talk about that later on, because one of the ways in joining, you can use your back loops to make a little ridge on the front, but I'll explain that as we go. So but to start off, to keep things simple, we're going to go through both the loops. So you'll have what looks like 3 loops in your hook, but don't worry about that. What we'll need to do now, once you've got your hook through the stitch at the top, you now need to yarn over, pull back through like you were on the row below, and then just yarn over and pull through the 2. That bit's still the same. So you go through the, I keep wanting to yarn over because I keep wanting to do treble crochets. So go through the stitch, yarn over, pull back through, 2 loops in your hook, yarn over, pull through 2. And you're just going to repeat that until the end of the row. Now this row tends to be a lot quicker because you're not having to worry about the chains below, because you've already got the stitches to actually go through. It always takes me longer to do the first row because I'm having to double check the stitches and count the chain to make sure I haven't missed one like you saw at the beginning. So once you get towards the end, like I have here, you'll probably think you've got 2 stitches left. You've only got 1 because this is the turning chain. So you go in to there and just do your last one, like so. And that's your row 2. Now this row 2 is which row you're going to repeat to get to this back and forth pattern. Now we need 12 rows and we've done 2. So we need to repeat row 2 10 more times to get to this size. So I'll do it one more time with you and then I'll let you go and do a few more rows. And then I'll show you how to finish off. So we need to chain 1, turn your work, go through the first stitch at the bottom, yarn over, pull back through, yarn over, pull through 2. So you're just repeating that. Like so. So that's row 3. Yep. So now I'll let you loose and do 9 more rows. I can't count today. 9 more rows of that, and I'll meet back up with you and I'll show you how to tie off. Right, so I've now got 12 rows. Now how to count this, I'll zoom in a bit for you here. So how we count this square, just pull up on the end a little bit there, is if you pull it out a little bit, not too much, this row here, that's 1. As you can see, this stitch here kind of goes the other way. So that's row 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we've got 12 rows there. Now, the magic number for this pattern, whether you turn it into a scarf or, like me, a blanket, it will have the magic number of 12. And that's meaning 12 rows by 12 stitches. Now, I say magic number, when you get onto the bigger stitches, like this one for example, the magic number will be 12 by 6. You'll be doing 6 rows of 12 stitches. Because, and I'll explain that more into details of the next row, a double crochet is twice the size, treble crochet is twice the size of a double crochet. So you will be doing twice as many rows on the double crochet as you will on the triple. But I'll explain that further on in more detail in the different sections. Now, so once you've got your 12 rows, as you can see, I've already done this little bit here. But once you've done your 12 rows and you know you've got 12 rows and 12 stitches, Just pull up on the last loop a little bit, like so. Grab your pair of scissors and cut a little tail. Well, little, big, that bit doesn't matter, depends on how much yarn you've got. So just cut a tail. Now grab your tail and literally put it through the hole and pull on it like that, as tight as you can. And that's how you'll finish your square. Now, what you'll need to do now is, as you can see, I've already got 2. I'll now need to make another 8 to make 10. And then I might make a few spare just in case. So I might make anywhere from 10 to 15 of these squares. So you can make a few more if you want, especially if you're practicing and just starting out. Make as many of these as you want, but make sure you have at least 10 to 15 of semi-decent ones, of ones that you're happy with to go into your project. Now, I say happy with because knowing me, I actually will make probably about 10 or 15 of them, and a couple of them I might not be happy with of how they've turned out, because they're too small or too tight or whatever. So I know from my personal experience it'll be squares that you'll be happy with. So I'll leave that with you. Have fun, enjoy yourselves, and make as many of these. We can also make this more squares if you fancied. So you can make the blanket twice as big if you want, but that's up to you. For the size that I'm wanting, make sure you have 10 to 15 of these, and I'll see you next week, where we will talk through this square next, which is the treble crochet. Okay, and I'll see you next week. Bye.